The Goss Community Press in the basement of the Harlan County Register has not been connected to a power source since November of 2014. I know this because I am the one who disconnected it. I capped the electrical leads myself, drained the ink reservoirs, removed the plate cylinders, and filed the decommission report with the county. I have the work order framed above my bench, order number MC-7751, dated November 11th, signed by me, Gerald Jerry Merrick, lead press technician, 22 years of service. That press is dead. I killed it. And every Tuesday morning at 4:15, it prints a fresh obituary page. The ink is warm. The paper is cut clean. And the names on the page are people who have not died yet. I need to be specific about that because I know how it sounds. I am not talking about vague predictions. I am not talking about coincidence or pattern recognition or some old mechanic losing his grip on retirement. I am talking about a full broadsheet obituary page, typeset in the Register's original Cheltenham typeface, printed on the same 55-pound newsprint we used to order from the Boise Mill, complete obituaries. Name, age, survived by, preceded in death, service arrangements, and the little biographical paragraph that families pay extra for, published every Tuesday. And within 72 hours of that page coming off the press, every person named on it is dead. I have been collecting these pages for 11 months. I keep them in a fireproof lockbox in the bed of my truck. 46 pages, 112 names, every single one confirmed. I check them against the county death records myself. I drive to the funeral homes. I read the real obituaries when they appear in the Lexington Herald-Leader or on the funeral home websites, and I compare them word for word against what my dead press printed days before the person stopped breathing. The details match. Not approximately. Not close enough. They match the way a photocopy matches its original. Same wording, same survived by order, same service times, same everything. I need to explain how I got here, and I need you to understand who I am, because this is not a ghost story. This is a maintenance report. My name is Gerald Merrick. People call me Jerry. I am 59 years old, and I have spent my entire adult life servicing printing presses. I started at 18 as a helper at the old Courier Journal plant in Louisville, pulling paper rolls and cleaning blanket cylinders until my hands stayed black no matter how much Gojo I used. I learned web offset on a Goss Urbanite. I learned cold set, heat set, quarter fold, half fold, tabloid cut, broadsheet cut. I can tell you the torque setting for a blanket clamp on a Harris 515 from memory. I can hear a bearing going bad from 30 feet away over the noise of a full print run. This was my life. This was the only thing I was ever good at. By 2005, I was working at the Harlan County Register, which was already a small paper in a small town getting smaller. Circulation had dropped from 12,000 to about 3,100. The staff shrank from 40 to 11, but the press kept running, and as long as the press kept running, they needed me. The Goss Community was a unit-type press, manufactured in 1978, 4 printing units, 1 folder. She could do 20,000 impressions per hour on a good night, which was more than we ever needed. But there was something beautiful about having that capacity, like owning a truck with a V8 engine you only ever drive to the grocery store. You know the power's there. You feel it in the frame. The Register went digital only in 2014. The announcement came on a Thursday. By the following Monday, I had my decommission orders. Nobody from the paper even came down to watch. The editor at the time, a woman named Sandra Kell, sent me an email for a press that had been printing her paper for 36 years. She thanked me for my service and told me the county had agreed to let the press remain in the basement as a historical artifact until a decision was made about the building. That decision never came. The building is still owned by the county. The Register still operates out of the 2 upstairs offices as a website and a Facebook page run by 2 part-time reporters and an advertising coordinator. The basement is mine. That sounds like an exaggeration, but it is not. After the decommission, the county offered me a part-time custodial contract for the building. 20 hours a week, minimum wage, maintain the HVAC, keep the pipes from freezing in winter, manage the parking lot. I took it because the alternative was driving to Lexington for work or leaving Harlan County. And I have been in Harlan County my whole life. My father worked the mines in Evarts. My mother taught 3rd grade at Carwood Elementary. I buried them both at Rest Haven Cemetery on Route 38. Leaving was not an option. So I became the janitor of the building that held the machine I had spent 20 years keeping alive. I mopped the floors above her. I replaced fluorescent tubes in the hallway outside the stairwell that led down to her. I checked the thermostat and made sure the basement stayed between 55 and 65 degrees, because even decommissioned, a press should not be subject to extreme temperature swings. The ink residue in the roller trains can crack. The rubber blankets can dry rot. Nobody asked me to maintain those conditions. Nobody told me to keep the press clean. I just did it. Every Thursday evening, after the upstairs staff left, I went down to the basement and spent 2 hours wiping down the press. I oiled the bearer rings, even though they would never turn again. I checked the blanket tension, even though no paper would ever pass through those cylinders. I kept a rag in my back pocket specifically for the folder unit. A clean fold is the last thing that touches the paper before it reaches the reader. The fold matters. A pressman who does not respect the fold is not a pressman. My wife, Dorothy, asked me once why I still maintained a dead machine. This was in 2016, a year and a half after the decommission. We were sitting on the porch after dinner. The light was going copper over Pine Mountain, and the cicadas were loud enough to drown out the television through the screen door. Dorothy was crocheting a blanket for our granddaughter, Emma, and she asked the question without looking up from her work. "Why do you still go down there, Jerry?" I told her it was part of the custodial contract. She looked at me over her reading glasses and said, "The contract says mop the floors and check the heat. It does not say polish a machine nobody will ever use again." She was right. She was usually right. But I could not explain it to her in a way that made sense, because the truth was not rational. The truth was that the press was the last version of me that I recognized. The man who serviced that machine knew who he was. The man who mopped floors above it did not. Maintaining the press was not about the press. It was about maintaining myself. Dorothy died in March of 2019. Pancreatic cancer. Diagnosed in December, gone by spring. 91 days from the first scan to the last breath. The oncologist in Lexington used the phrase rapid progression, which is a clinical way of saying the disease did not even pretend to give us time. We did not get a long goodbye. We got a short, brutal one. After she passed, I reduced my world to the smallest possible circuit. Truck to building, building to basement, basement to press, press to home, home to bed, bed to truck. I ate at the Ponderosa on Fridays because Dorothy and I used to eat there, and stopping felt like admitting she was gone. I bought groceries at the IGA on Central Street because she had an account there, and they still called me Mr. Merrick when I checked out. My life became a series of maintenance routines, and the press was the center of all of them. The first page appeared on a Tuesday morning in June of 2025. I came in at 5:30, which was my usual time. I unlocked the street door, turned off the alarm panel, walked the upstairs hallway, checking for leaks or blown lights. Everything normal. I went down the concrete stairs to the basement, hit the overhead fluorescence. The press sat where it always sat, a 12-ton arrangement of cast iron and steel and rubber, cold and still and dark. But there was paper in the delivery tray of the folder unit. That sentence does not convey what I felt. Let me try again. There was a freshly printed, cleanly folded, still warm broadsheet page sitting in the delivery tray of a press that had no power, no ink supply, no plate cylinders, and no paper feed. The paper was not dusty. It was not yellowed. It was not something that had been stuck in the mechanism for 11 years and worked itself loose. It was warm. The ink transferred to my thumb when I touched the headline. I set the page down on my workbench and turned on the gooseneck lamp. The masthead read, "The Harlan County Register," in the exact typeface and layout we used from 1988 until the final print edition. Below the masthead, centered, it read, "Obituaries." One column, one name. Harold Eugene Messer, age 78, of Baxter, Kentucky. The obituary was detailed. Born June 14, 1947, in Letcher County. Korean War veteran, retired from the L&N Railroad. Survived by 2 sons and a daughter. Preceded in death by his wife, Alma. Service at the Hensley Funeral Home, Thursday at 2 o'clock. I read it 3 times. I did not know Harold Messer, but the name felt real. The details felt specific in the way real obituaries are specific. There was no poetry to it, no dramatic language, just the plain, functional prose of a community newspaper listing a death the way it would list a school board meeting or a church supper. I set the page aside. I told myself it was a prank. Someone had access to the building, had somehow fed a pre-printed page into the folder tray, and was trying to rattle the old press mechanic. It was not funny, but it was the most logical explanation. I checked the basement door, which locks from the inside with a deadbolt I installed myself. Locked. I checked the small window wells at ground level. Painted shut, same as always. I checked the press itself. No power, no paper loaded, no ink in the reservoirs. I opened the side panels on each printing unit and checked the plate cylinders. Empty. No plates, no blankets on the blanket cylinders either. I had removed them years ago. They were wrapped in plastic on a shelf in the storage closet. The press could not have printed that page. I knew this the way I know my own hands. I had disassembled enough of the critical path that even if someone had reconnected the power, the machine would have produced nothing but blank paper at best, a jammed mess at worst. What sat on my workbench was a clean, registered, properly inked, broadsheet page. 4 color black. No ghosting, no doubling, no smearing except where my thumb had touched it. I folded the page and put it in my jacket pocket. I finished my shift. I went home. I ate a sandwich and watched the local news out of hazard. I fell asleep in the recliner Dorothy bought at the Corbin Furniture Store in 2012. 2 days later, Harold Eugene Messer died. I found out because the Hensley Funeral Home posted his obituary on their website. A co-worker's wife shared it on Facebook, and I saw it while scrolling on my phone during my lunch break. I pulled the page from my jacket pocket, unfolded it on the hood of my truck, and read them side by side on my phone screen. Identical, word for word. The funeral home's version had a photo of Harold in a VFW cap, smiling in front of a flag. The printed page had no photo because the register never ran photos in its obituary section. We did not have the reproduction quality for it, but every word, every date, every surviving family member listed in the exact same order. The service time, the burial location, the request for donations to be made to the disabled American veterans in lieu of flowers, all of it matching. I sat on the tailgate of my truck for a long time after that. The parking lot was empty. The building hummed with the HVAC unit I had serviced the previous month. A mockingbird was going through its routine in the sycamore by the street. The world was ordinary. The world was functioning exactly as designed. And in my pocket was a page that should not exist, announcing a death that had not yet happened, printed by a machine that could not print. I went back down to the basement that evening. I brought a flashlight and a voltage tester, even though I knew there was no voltage to test. I ran the tester along every electrical pathway in the press. Dead. 0 across all terminals. I opened the ink fountain on the first unit. Dry. I ran my hand along the paper path from the roll stand to the folder. Nothing. No moisture, no residue, no indication that paper had moved through the machine. Then I checked the folder tray again. Empty. Clean. The same tray where I had found the page that morning. I stood there in the basement with the fluorescent lights buzzing above me, and I placed my hand flat on the side frame of the press. The cast iron was cold. 58 degrees, same as the room. No vibration, no warmth, no sign of life. What did you do? I said it out loud. My voice sounded foolish in that concrete space. The press did not answer because presses do not answer. They are machines. They do what you tell them when you feed them power and ink and paper and plates. They do not generate content. They do not make decisions. They reproduce what has been given to them at scale with precision. That is all they do. That is all they are supposed to do. The following Tuesday, I arrived at 5:15, 15 minutes earlier than usual. The delivery tray was empty. I checked it at 5:30. Empty. At 5:45. Empty. I pulled a folding chair from the storage closet and sat in front of the folder unit, watching, waiting. The basement was silent except for the faint electrical hum of the fluorescents and the occasional tick of the HVAC ductwork expanding in the ceiling. At 4:15 in the morning on the following Tuesday, which is to say 1 week after the first page, I was not there. I was asleep at home. But when I arrived at 5:30, there it was. A single broadsheet page, warm, clean, folded, sitting in the tray like a dog bringing the morning paper to your feet. 2 names this time. Brenda Fay Collett, age 62, of Cumberland, survived by her husband Randall and 3 children. Service at the First Baptist Church of Cumberland, Saturday at 11. And Douglas Wayne Howard, age 85, of Everts, World War II veteran, survived by 4 grandchildren and 11 great-grandchildren. Service at the Mountain View Chapel, Friday at 1 o'clock. Both were dead within 3 days. Brenda Collett had a stroke on the Thursday. Douglas Howard passed in his sleep on the Wednesday night. The funeral home listings matched the printed page exactly, down to the request in Douglas Howard's obituary for pallbearers to wear comfortable shoes, because Doug would not have wanted anyone suffering on his account. That detail is what broke something in me. Not the impossibility of the printing, not the prediction of death. That one small, human, specific detail about comfortable shoes. Because that is not a detail a machine generates. That is a detail a family gives to a funeral director, sitting in a consultation room, wiping their eyes, trying to honor who their person was. That detail comes from love, from knowledge, from the accumulated weight of knowing someone for 85 years of holidays and arguments and shared meals, and it was on my page before the man had even died. I started coming in earlier, 3 in the morning and then 2. I brought a thermos of coffee and my folding chair, and I sat in that basement, watching the press, waiting for 4:15 on a Tuesday. The concrete floor numbed my feet through my boots. The air smelled the way it always smelled down there, machine oil and old paper, and the faint chemical ghost of fountain solution that no amount of ventilation would ever fully remove. I knew that smell better than I knew the smell of my own house. On the 3rd Tuesday, I was there, 2:45 in the morning, sitting in my chair, 12 feet from the folder unit, thermos between my boots, gooseneck lamp on the workbench casting a yellow circle that did not quite reach the press. The rest of the basement was gray fluorescent, and deep shadow in the corners where the overhead tubes had burned out and I had not replaced them. Nothing happened at 3. Nothing at 3:30. Nothing at 4. I was starting to feel the particular foolishness of a grown man in a cold basement, waiting for a machine to do something impossible, when at 4:14, the overhead fluorescence dimmed, not flickered, dimmed. The way lights dim when something on the same circuit draws a heavy load. Except there was nothing on the same circuit. I had the electrical plan for the building memorized. At 4:15, I heard the folder. The sound a Goss folder unit makes when it receives and folds a sheet is distinctive, a mechanical sequence. The tucker blade pushes the sheet between the folding rollers, and there is a particular thump-hiss-click that any pressman would recognize in his sleep. I heard that sound once. 1 sheet, 1 fold. I did not move from my chair. My hands were wrapped around the thermos. The steam had stopped rising from the coffee 20 minutes ago. I sat and I listened. The fluorescence returned to full brightness. The basement was silent again. After 5 minutes, I stood up. I walked to the folder tray. 1 page, warm, clean, 3 names this time. I picked it up and carried it to the workbench. I sat down on my stool. I read the names. I did not recognize any of them. All 3 were dead by Thursday. That was when I started keeping records. I bought a composition notebook from the Dollar General on Main Street, the kind with the black and white marbled cover that every kid in eastern Kentucky has carried to school at some point. I logged each page. Date found, number of names, full text of each obituary, and then in a second column on the right side, the confirmed date of death and the source of confirmation. Funeral home website, county death certificate, or local news report. I kept this notebook in the lockbox in my truck bed along with the pages themselves. By the 4th week, I had confirmed 9 deaths. By the 6th week, 17. The pattern was rigid. Every Tuesday. Always at 4:15. Always 1 page, broadsheet, single column. The number of names varied, sometimes 1, sometimes as many as 5. The obituaries were always for people in Harlan County or the immediate surrounding counties. Letcher, Bell, Perry, Pike once or twice. Never anyone from outside the Coalfield region. Never anyone famous or notable, just ordinary people. Miners, teachers, retirees, church deacons, mothers, veterans, the kinds of people whose deaths make page 6 of a local paper and nowhere else. The causes of death, when I could verify them, were always natural. Heart failure, stroke, cancer that had already been diagnosed, complications from diabetes, old age, nothing violent, nothing suspicious, nothing that would attract attention from law enforcement or the medical community. These were deaths that were going to happen anyway, or at least that is what I told myself during those early weeks. These people were already sick, already old, already circling the drain that waits for all of us. The press was not killing anyone, and the press was reporting. That distinction mattered to me. It still matters to me, though I am less certain of it now than I was then. In the 7th week, I decided to research the press itself, not the mechanical specifications, which I knew better than any living person. The history. Where it had been before Harlan County. Who had owned it. What it had printed. The Goss Community series was manufactured in Chicago from the mid-1970s through the early 1990s. Standard equipment for small community newspapers across the country. Our unit had a serial number stamped into the mainframe casting. GK-7802-1147. I had read that number 1,000 times while cleaning the frame. I had never thought to trace it. I started with the Goss International's records, or what was left of them. Goss had been through multiple bankruptcies and acquisitions. Their archives were scattered. I called 3 different companies that had absorbed parts of the old Goss operation before I reached a woman in a suburban Chicago office who had access to a shipping database going back to 1976. GC-7802-1147, she read back to me. Shipped May 1978. Original purchaser, the Harlan County Register, Harlan, Kentucky. That is it? I asked. It was manufactured and shipped directly to us? That is what the record shows, sir. I thanked her and hung up. Dead end. Or so I thought. 2 days later, the woman called me back. She had been doing some filing and had come across a note attached to the original shipping order. A handwritten note, photocopied and stapled to the invoice. She read it to me over the phone. Unit GC-7802-1147, assembly note. Frame casting sourced from Lot 7802. Lot 7802 cast from reclaimed metal stock, origin unverified. Metallurgical report attached. C-file. She did not have the file. The metallurgical report, whatever it had contained, was gone. But the phrase reclaimed metal stock, origin unverified, stayed with me. In 1978, Goss was manufacturing hundreds of these units. They used standardized steel and iron castings from contracted foundries. Reclaimed metal was not unusual. Old machines were melted down and recast into new ones all the time. It was economical and practical. But the phrase origin unverified was unusual. That meant someone had flagged the metal source as unknown. Someone in the foundry had noted that they did not know where this particular batch of iron had come from, and someone at Goss had considered that notable enough to attach a report to the shipping order. I tried to trace the foundry. The casting lot number, 7802, corresponded to a contract foundry in Gary, Indiana, that had closed in 1986. The property was now a parking lot for a medical office building. No record survived. I let it go for a while. The pages kept coming. Every Tuesday, I collected them, logged them, confirmed the deaths. The routine became part of my life the way all routines become part of a life. Wake up, coffee, drive to the building, check the basement. Collect the page if it was Tuesday, log the names, confirm the deaths later in the week. Repeat. It was my granddaughter Emma who pushed me further. She was visiting in August, staying with me for 2 weeks while her mother, my daughter Karen, attended a work conference in Nashville. Emma was 17 that summer, sharp and curious in the way Dorothy had been, with the same habit of asking questions that sounded casual but cut straight to the center of things. She asked to see the basement. I told her it was just an old press in a dark room. She said she wanted to see where Grandpa worked. That word worked, present tense, even though I had not worked that press in over a decade. Kids see what adults refuse to. I took her down. She walked the length of the press, trailing her hand along the frame the way I had done the first time I saw it in 1994. She asked me the names of the parts: ink fountain, dampening unit, plate cylinder, blanket cylinder, impression cylinder, folder. I showed her the paper path. I explained registration, how the different printing units had to align perfectly so the text was sharp and readable. She listened with the kind of patience you do not expect from a teenager. When we reached the folder unit, she leaned down and looked at the delivery tray. "What is this?" she asked. She was pointing at the underside of the tray, the stamped metal surface that faced the floor. I had never looked at the underside of the delivery tray. Why would I? It was a functional component. You look at the top surface, where the product lands. You look at the mechanical assembly. You do not flip it over and examine the bottom like a child checking for a price tag. I knelt down beside her. There was writing on the underside of the tray. Not printed. Not stamped. Scratched into the metal with something sharp. A nail, maybe, or a flathead screwdriver. The scratches were old. The metal around them had oxidized to a dull brown. Whoever had made these marks had done it a long time ago. The writing was small. I needed my reading glasses and the flashlight from my belt to make it out. Emma held the flashlight while I read. It said, "Tuesdays only. Do not take the names to anyone. Do not try to warn them. Do not interfere. She only prints what is already true. If you take this job, you accept a page." Below that, in different handwriting, smaller and more cramped. "Frank's right. Do not fight it. I tried. Check the April 1991 page. My wife's name was on it. She died on schedule. I could not save her, and I cannot save you. Maintain the press. Accept the page. That is the job." Below that, a third hand, printed in neat block letters. How long has she been doing this? I found pages in the storage room dating back to 1979, first year of operation. She started printing the dead before the living had their first edition. This is not a malfunction. This is the purpose. I sat on the concrete floor of that basement and read those 3 messages over and over while Emma stood beside me holding the flashlight. She asked me what the words meant. I told her it was old graffiti from former employees. She accepted that. Teenagers accept adult lies more often than adults think, not because they believe them, but because they have learned that pressing further rarely produces a better answer. After Emma went to bed that night, I drove back to the building. It was past 10. The parking lot was dark. The street light on the corner had been out for 3 weeks, and the county had not sent anyone to replace it. I unlocked the building, turned on only the stairwell light, and went down to the basement. The storage closet in the basement was a 10 by 12 room with metal shelving units bolted to the walls. I had been in that closet hundreds of times. It held cleaning supplies, spare parts for the press, old maintenance logs, and several boxes of materials left over from the paper's operational years. I had never gone through those boxes thoroughly. They were labeled with masking tape and marker. Plates 2009 to 2013. Ink samples. Missed supplies. Archive, do not discard. That last box. I pulled it off the shelf. It was a banker's box, the kind with a lid and handholds on the sides. The tape was yellowed. The marker had faded to a pale blue. Inside, I found newspaper pages, not bound editions, not complete papers, just the obituary pages. Dozens of them. Hundreds. Stacked neatly. Oldest at the bottom, newest at the top. The top page was dated October 2014, 1 month before I decommissioned the press. The bottom page was dated February 1979, 3 months after the press was installed. I carried the box to my workbench and started going through it. Every page was a Tuesday page. Every page was a single-column obituary layout. Every page bore the Harlan County Register masthead. And every page listed names that I could check, if I had the time and the patience and access, to 45 years of death records. The earliest page, February 1979, listed one name. Alma Jean Duff, age 34, of Wallens Creek. Breast cancer. Survived by her husband Thomas and an infant daughter. I stared at that page under the gooseneck lamp. The paper was brittle and browned at the edges. The ink had faded but was still legible. Alma Jean Duff, 34 years old. The same age my daughter Karen was now. Someone's wife, someone's mother. Dead before the press had even printed its first regular edition for the public. The third message, scratched under the delivery tray, was right. The press had been doing this from the beginning, before its first issue, before its first subscriber, before anyone in Harlan County knew the Register had a new press. The first thing this machine ever printed was a list of the dead. I went through the box, page by page, working backward through the years. The pages were not continuous. There were gaps, months missing, sometimes years. Whoever had been collecting them had not collected everyone. Some pages were water-stained or torn. Some were stuck together with age and had to be separated with a palette knife, which I did slowly, in the way you handle old documents, with flat pressure and patience. Around 1985, the handwriting appeared. Notes in the margins of the pages. Small, tight cursive in blue ballpoint ink. Confirmed May 12th. Confirmed 3 for 3. All accurate. God help me. And then, on a page from September 1987, a longer note written on the back of the sheet. My name is Frank Bates. I have been the press operator at the Harlan County Register since 1978. I am the first operator this press has had. I installed her with the Goss field technician, a man named Riley, who told me she was a standard unit. He did not mention the Tuesday pages. He may not have known. I discovered the first page on my third week. I have been collecting them since. I have not told anyone. Who would I tell? What would I say? The machine that prints the Tuesday paper also prints the Tuesday dead. They would fire me. They would send me for evaluation. I would lose everything. So I collect the pages, and I confirm the names, and I maintain the press, because if I do not maintain her, I do not know what she will do. A machine this precise deserves maintenance. A machine this faithful deserves respect. I do not understand her, but I serve her, and she has never failed to be accurate. That is more than I can say for the people who employ me. Frank Bates. I recognized the name. Not because I had known him, but because I had seen his name on old maintenance logs in the filing cabinet upstairs. He was the press operator before the man who trained me. The lineage went Frank Bates, 1978 to 1991. Then Curtis Webb, 1991 to 2003. Then me, 2003 to 2014. 3 operators in 36 years. That is normal for a small paper. Press work is specialized. You find someone who knows the machine, and you keep them until they leave or die. Curtis Webb had trained me. He was a quiet man from Bell County who smelled like cigarettes and fountain solution and who spoke in short, declarative sentences about mechanical tolerances and never about anything personal. He retired in 2003, shook my hand once, and drove away in his Dodge pickup. I never saw him again. He died in 2011. Heart attack. At home, alone. I read about it in the Herald Leader. The second message scratched under the delivery tray. Different handwriting from Frank Bates. Smaller. More cramped. Frank is right. That was Curtis. Curtis had found Frank's message and added his own, and the third message in neat block letters, the one about pages dating back to 1979. That was someone who came after Curtis. That was someone who had looked in the same box and reached the same conclusion I was reaching now. That was me. Or it was going to be me, because the block letters were unfamiliar, and the only other person who had regular access to this basement was me. I had not written that message. Not yet. But the oxidation on those scratches was years old. The metal had weathered around them. They were not new. I closed the box. I turned off the lamp. I sat in the dark basement for a long time, listening to the building breathe through its ductwork, feeling the cold concrete through the soles of my boots. The press was a shadow in the darkness. 12 tons of iron and steel and purpose waiting for Tuesday. The next morning, I called the county clerk's office. I told them I was doing historical research for a maintenance archive and asked if they could look up a death record. Alma Jean Duff, or Wallens Creek, estimated date of death, February 1979. The clerk put me on hold for 11 minutes. When she came back, she confirmed it. Alma Jean Duff, born 1944, died February 22, 1979. Cause of death, metastatic breast cancer. Survived by husband Thomas Edward Duff and daughter Carol Ann Duff, age 14 months. The press had been right from its first page. 46 years of accuracy. 46 years of printing the dead before they died, Tuesday after Tuesday, for anyone patient enough to check the tray. I began to spend my evenings in the basement, going through the archive box and cross-referencing names against every public death record I could access. The county clerk's office, online obituary databases, cemetery records at Rest Haven and Mountain View and Keith Memorial, church bulletins from First Baptist and the Pentecostal Holiness on Ivy Hill. I checked every name I could check, going back through the decades. My confirmation rate was not 100%, because many of the older records were incomplete or inaccessible. Small counties in Appalachia did not digitize their death records until the mid-2000s, and many of the paper records from the 1970s and 1980s are stored in boxes in courthouses that have flooded, burned, or been consolidated. But of the names I could verify, every single one matched. 237 confirmed deaths across 46 years. Not one error. Not one name printed in the Tuesday page that did not appear in the death records within 72 hours of the date on the page. I kept two lists in my notebook, the confirmed dead and the questions I could not answer. The questions grew faster than the confirmations. Why Tuesday? Why 4:15 in the morning? Why only Harlan County and the surrounding area? Why obituaries and not some other format? Why this press? Was it the machine itself, or was it the metal in the machine, the unverified casting stock from the unnamed foundry in Gary? Was it the location, the basement of the specific building on this specific street in this specific town? If I moved the press, would it still print? If I destroyed the press, would the deaths still happen? That last question kept me awake. Because if the press was not causing the deaths, only predicting them, then destroying it would accomplish nothing except eliminating the only advance notice anyone had. And if the press was somehow causing the deaths, if the act of printing the obituary was what set the death in motion, then I had been collecting execution orders for months and doing nothing about it. I needed to test it. I needed to know whether the names on the page were descriptions of an inevitable future or instructions being carried out. And there was only one way to test that. I had to find a name on the page before the person died, and I had to try to intervene, warn them, get them to a doctor, change their routine, do something, anything, that might break the 72-hour window between the page and the death. The message scratched under the delivery tray told me not to. Do not try to warn them. Do not interfere. Curtis Webb's addendum told me he had tried and failed. His wife's name had been on a page in April 1991. She had died on schedule. Whatever Curtis had done to intervene, it had not worked. But Curtis was not me. Curtis was a smoker who spoke in short sentences and trusted machines more than people. I was a man who had watched his wife die of cancer in 91 days and had spent every day since then looking for something he could not name. Maybe it was purpose. Maybe it was proof that maintaining things mattered. Maybe it was the arrogance of a mechanic who believed that if he understood how something worked, he could fix it. On the first Tuesday in September, the page listed 4 names. The third name was someone I recognized, Peggy Louise Cornett, age 71, of Harlan, Dorothy's hairdresser, the woman who had cut my wife's hair every 6 weeks for 23 years, the woman who had held Dorothy's hand in the salon chair when the chemo started, taking her hair out in clumps. Peggy had closed the shop for an hour that day, pulled the blinds, and let Dorothy cry without an audience. I owed Peggy Cornett a debt I could never repay. Her obituary said she would die of a cardiac event. Service at the First United Methodist Church, Saturday at 10. Survived by her husband Delbert and 2 sons. I had 3 days. I drove to Peggy's salon on Tuesday afternoon. Peggy's place on Central Street, 3 doors down from the IGA, a small storefront with a striped awning that Delbert had installed in 1998 and repainted every 5 years whether it needed it or not. The open sign was lit. Through the window I could see Peggy at her station, working on a woman's hair, talking with her hands the way she always did, the scissors catching the overhead light each time she gestured. I sat in my truck across the street for 40 minutes, trying to figure out what to say. Every version sounded insane. Peggy, I have a printing press in my basement that says, "You are going to die this week." Peggy, I know this sounds crazy, but you need to see a cardiologist today. Peggy, I cannot tell you how I know, but your heart is going to fail within 72 hours. There was no version of this conversation that did not end with Peggy calling my daughter Karen to say she was worried about me, or calling the sheriff's department to report a disturbed man making threats. I went in anyway. The bell above the door rang, that same small brass bell that had rung for Dorothy every 6 weeks for 23 years. The shop smelled like hairspray, and the vanilla candle Peggy kept burning on the reception desk. 2 stations, 2 chairs, but Peggy had been the only stylist since her partner retired in 2016. The walls were covered with framed photographs of customers, community events, church suppers. Dorothy was in 3 of those photos. I knew exactly where each one hung without looking. "Jerry Merrick," Peggy said, and she smiled the way people smile at someone they associate with a specific sadness. The smile that means, "I remember your wife and I am sorry. You need a haircut, honey. Come sit." I did not need a haircut. I sat anyway. The vinyl chair creaked under my weight. Peggy draped the cape around my neck and fastened it with the clip. Her hands were warm. Her fingers were strong from decades of working scissors 8 hours a day. I watched her in the mirror, 71 years old, reading glasses pushed up into her silver hair, a small gold cross on a chain that rested in the hollow of her throat. She looked healthy. She looked like she would live another 20 years. "Peggy," I said, "when was the last time you saw a doctor?" She laughed. "Is this a haircut or an intervention?" "I am serious. A real doctor. Not the walk-in clinic. Full physical. Heart, blood work, and the whole thing." She stopped cutting. Our eyes met in the mirror. "Jerry, what is this about?" I had rehearsed several lies in my truck. I used the simplest one. A buddy of mine just had a heart attack. No warning. He was my age, healthy, active, gone in an hour. It shook me up. And I started thinking about the people in my life that I cannot afford to lose. And you are on that list, Peggy. Dorothy would haunt me if I did not say something. The invocation of Dorothy's name did what I needed it to do. Peggy's expression softened. She put her hand on my shoulder. "I see Dr. Patel in Middlesboro every year for my checkup. Last one was in March. Everything was fine. Cholesterol's a little high, but whose is not at my age? Did he check your heart? Like really check it? An EKG? A stress test? He listened with the stethoscope. He said, I sounded fine. That is not the same thing. A stethoscope does not catch everything. Please, Peggy, go see a cardiologist this week. Do it as a favor to me." She studied me in the mirror for a long time. I could see her deciding whether I was genuinely concerned or losing my mind. Whatever she concluded, compassion won out over suspicion. "All right, Jerry. I will call Dr. Patel's office tomorrow and ask for a referral. But a cardiologist in this area means driving to Lexington, and the earliest appointment will be weeks out. Tell them it is urgent. Tell them you have been having chest pains." "But I have not been having chest pains." "Tell them anyway, please." She finished cutting my hair. I paid her $20, which was $5 more than she charged, and I left. I sat in my truck and gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles ached. I had done something. I had intervened. Frank Bates and Curtis Webb had told me not to, but I had done it. Now I waited. Peggy called Dr. Patel's office on Wednesday morning. I know this because she called me afterward to tell me so, amused by my concern, treating it like the harmless anxiety of a lonely widower. Patel's office referred her to a cardiologist in Lexington. The earliest available appointment was October 16. That's 6 weeks away. I told her that was too late. She told me she felt fine. I told her to go to the emergency room. She told me, gently but firmly, that she was not going to the emergency room because Jerry Merrick had a bad feeling. On Thursday morning, Peggy Louise Cornett collapsed on the floor of her salon at 9:42. Massive myocardial infarction. The customer in her chair, a woman named Ruth Ann Hensley, called 911. The ambulance arrived in 14 minutes, which is fast for Harlem. The paramedics worked on her in the ambulance all the way to the hospital in Middlesboro. She was pronounced dead at 11:18. I found out at noon. Karen called me. She had seen it on Facebook. She was crying. I was not. I was sitting on the tailgate of my truck in the parking lot of the building that held the press, and I was holding the Tuesday page with Peggy's name on it. And I was not crying because something inside me had shifted from grief to a cold, mechanical clarity that I recognized from my years of diagnosing press malfunctions. When a press breaks, you do not cry about it. You do not rage at it. You diagnose the failure, identify the cause, and determine whether it can be repaired. Emotion is irrelevant to the process. The machine does not care how you feel. The machine only cares whether you understand it. I understood something now. Warning Peggy had not worked. Getting her to call a doctor had not worked. The 72-hour window was not a window at all. It was a courtesy. The press was not predicting a possible future. It was printing a settled one. The obituary was not a forecast. It was a receipt, issued in advance, for a transaction that had already been completed in some ledger I could not see. Curtis Webb had learned this lesson with his wife in 1991. He had scratched his warning under the delivery tray to save whoever came next. The agony of hoping. Do not try to warn them. Do not interfere. She only prints what is already true. I went back to Frank Bates's note in the archive box. I read it again, looking for something I had missed. I do not understand her, but I serve her, and she has never failed to be accurate. Frank had not tried to intervene. Frank had accepted the pages from the beginning. He had understood, perhaps instinctively, perhaps through some early failure he did not document, that the press was not offering a choice. It was offering information. What you did with that information was up to you, but the information itself was immutable. I spent the rest of September in a state that I can only describe as functional numbness. I went to Peggy's funeral. I sat in the third pew at First United Methodist, and I listened to the pastor describe a life of service and warmth and community. Delbert sat in the front row with his sons. He looked like a man who had been disassembled and put back together wrong. I recognized that look. I had worn it myself 6 years ago. After the service, I stood in the parking lot and watched people file out. Ruth Ann Hensley, the woman who had been in Peggy's chair when she collapsed, stopped beside me. She was a small woman, mid-60s, with a face that looked permanently startled. She was cutting my hair, Ruth Ann said. She was in the middle of a sentence. She was telling me about a recipe for blackberry cobbler that she got from her mother-in-law. And then she stopped talking, and I heard the scissors hit the floor, and I turned around, and she was on the ground. I nodded. The doctor said it was massive, said even if she had been in the hospital when it happened, There might not have been anything they could do. Ruth Ann looked at me. Is that true? Is that how hearts work? I do not know, I said. I fix machines. Same thing, some people would say. She walked to her car. I stood in the parking lot until it was empty. The October light was the color of weak tea, filtering through clouds that hung over the mountains like bandages. I drove to the building. I went down to the basement. I sat in my folding chair in front of the press, and I talked to it. I am not proud of that. A 59-year-old man sitting in a concrete basement, talking to a 12-ton printing press. But Dorothy was gone. Peggy was gone. Emma was back in Louisville with Karen. The upstairs staff left by 5 and did not speak to me beyond a nod in the hallway. The press was the most consistent relationship in my life. It performed its function without fail, without complaint, without deviation. It gave me information I did not want, on a schedule I did not choose, in a format I understood better than any other human alive. If that is not a relationship, I do not know what is. Why do you do this? I asked it. My voice echoed off the concrete walls and the low ceiling. The press did not answer. The fluorescents buzzed. The HVAC duct ticked. You are not a sentient thing. You are iron and steel and rubber. You are cylinders and gears and bearings. I know every part of you. I have replaced your components. I have adjusted your tolerances. I have cleaned your ink trains. There is no part of you that I have not touched. And none of those parts, individually or collectively, can explain what you do every Tuesday. Silence. The kind of silence that is not empty but full. The kind of silence that exists in a room where something is listening. I reached out and placed my hand on the frame. Cold iron. 57 degrees. The same temperature as the room. But under my palm, in some register below the tactile, I felt something. Not a vibration. Not warmth. A density. As though the metal under my hand was more present than the metal 6 inches to the left or right. As though the iron at this specific point contained more of itself than physics should allow. I moved my hand. The density followed. Not physically. Not in any way I could measure or describe to an engineer. But it was there. An attention in the metal. A focus. Who made you? I whispered. The fluorescence dimmed. Not dramatically. Not like the Tuesday dimming before a page appeared. Just a slight reduction, like the building sighing. Then they returned to normal. I pulled my hand back. I stood up. I walked to my workbench and opened my notebook. I wrote the date and one sentence. The press is aware of my hand. In October, something changed. The pages continued. Every Tuesday, 4:15, one page, warm and clean. But the obituaries began to include a new element. In the biographical paragraph at the end of each listing, between the details of the person's life and the information about services, a sentence appeared that did not belong. Wilma Garner, age 84, of Everts. The standard obituary. Born, married, children, employment, church membership. And then, Mrs. Garner was preceded in death by the knowledge that her passing would be observed by the Harlan County Register press room. And she carried this distinction without awareness, as do all who are printed before they are mourned. I read that sentence 6 times. It was not an obituary sentence. It was a statement about the press itself, about the act of printing, about the relationship between the page and the person named on it. The press was no longer just printing obituaries. It was printing commentary. It was annotating its own function. The next week, another annotation. Thomas Ray Baker, age 70, of Bledsoe. Standard obituary, and then Mr. Baker's death will complete a pattern begun in 1979 in which the printed word precedes the spoken eulogy by a margin sufficient to confirm that language, not biology, is the primary mechanism of human transition. Language, not biology, is the primary mechanism of human transition. I wrote that in my notebook and underlined it 3 times. The press was making a claim, not a prediction, not a report, a philosophical assertion. It was asserting that the act of printing an obituary was not a reflection of death, but a component of it. That the printed word was part of the mechanism by which a person moved from alive to dead. That the obituary did not describe the death. The obituary participated in it. If that was true, then I had been wrong. The press was not merely predicting deaths. It was not merely reporting a settled future. It was involved. The printing was part of the process. The Tuesday page was not a receipt. It was a step. One step in a sequence that ended with a body in a casket and a family in a church pew. And I was the one who maintained the machine that performed that step. I was the one who kept the iron clean, the bearings oiled, the temperature stable. I was the one who made sure the folder unit cut clean and the delivery tray was clear every week. I was the one who serviced the instrument of death. I put my notebook down. I looked at the press. It sat in the fluorescent light, huge and dark and patient. And for the first time since Dorothy's diagnosis, I felt something I could identify without hesitation. Complicity. I went through the archive box again that night. I checked every page from 1979 through 2014 for similar annotations. I found none. The commentary had started with me. Frank Bates had received clean obituaries. Curtis Webb had received clean obituaries. The press had given them facts and nothing more. It was giving me explanations. Why? What was different about me? I had maintained the press longer than anyone in its decommissioned state. I had spoken to it. I had placed my hand on its frame and felt something answer. Frank and Curtis had operated the press as employees performing a job. I had continued as a devotee, performing a ritual. Maybe the press recognized the difference. Maybe the annotations were a reward for loyalty. Maybe they were a test. Or maybe, after 46 years of printing the dead, the press had grown tired of silence and wanted someone to understand. The November pages escalated. The annotations grew longer, more personal. On the second Tuesday in November, the page listed 3 names, and the annotation in the final obituary read, "The pressman who reads this page has maintained this unit for 22 years. 11 of them passed its operational decommission. His cognitive baseline remains within acceptable parameters. His emotional profile indicates sustained grief without pathological distortion. He is suitable for continued service. Recommendation: advance to Phase 2, maintenance protocol. Cognitive baseline. Emotional profile. Suitable for continued service. Phase 2, maintenance protocol." This was institutional language, assessment language, the kind of language you find in personnel reviews and fitness for duty evaluations. The press was not just printing obituaries and commentary. It was evaluating me. Someone or something was using the press as a communication channel, and they had been watching me long enough to form an opinion about my mental health. I searched the building that night, top to bottom. Every room, every closet, every crawl space above the drop ceiling. I checked for cameras. I checked for recording devices. I checked the electrical panels for unfamiliar wiring. Nothing. The building was exactly what it appeared to be. A 2-story commercial structure built in 1962, with a newspaper office upstairs and a press room in the basement. No hidden rooms, no false walls, no surveillance equipment. But the press had used the phrase cognitive baseline. I had heard that phrase before, and though I could not remember where, it nagged at me through the weekend. On Monday morning it came to me. The filing cabinet upstairs, the one in the back office that nobody used. I had seen a folder in there years ago while looking for a maintenance schedule. The folder had been labeled CB7 Annual Compliance. I had opened it, seen forms I did not understand, and put it back. I went to the filing cabinet. The folder was still there. Inside were 11 forms, one for each year from 2003 to 2013. My years as the active press operator. Each form was identical in layout. Across the top, in small type, Cognitive Baseline Assessment Form. B-7. Personnel Monitoring Site 4, 481-M. Below that, fields for employee name, date of assessment, baseline score, deviation index, and a section labeled Continued Assignment Recommendation. Every form had my name on it. Gerald R. Merrick. Every form had a baseline score. Every form had been signed at the bottom by someone named Dr. R. Ellison. I had never taken a cognitive baseline assessment. I had never met anyone named Dr. Ellison. I had never heard of Site 481-M. And someone had been filing annual evaluations of my mental fitness for 11 years without my knowledge or participation. The scores were consistent. Baseline 78, 79, 77, 80, 78. The deviation index was always listed as within acceptable range. The continued assignment recommendation on every form was the same single word: maintain. I stood in that back office holding 11 years of my own personnel file from an organization I had never heard of, and the fluorescent tube above me hummed at a frequency that made my fillings ache. The building felt different. Not threatening, not hostile, attentive. The way a machine feels when you have just powered it on and it is running through its startup diagnostics, checking every system, making sure everything is ready before it begins its work. Site 4481-M. The M stood for monitoring. I did not know how I knew that, but I knew. I took the CB7 forms home. I spread them on the kitchen table under the overhead light that Dorothy had picked out at Lowe's in 2008, a brushed nickel pendant with a frosted glass shade. She had spent 40 minutes choosing between that one and a similar fixture that cost $12 more. She chose the cheaper one and put the $12 in the church offering the following Sunday. That was Dorothy. Every object in my house carried the fingerprint of a woman who calculated kindness into every purchase. I studied the forms until 2 in the morning. The layout was professional. Crisp typesetting, clean margins, form fields with consistent spacing. This was not something a person had created on a home computer. This was an institutional document produced by an organization with a design department, a printing budget, and a standardized assessment protocol. The paper stock was heavier than commercial copy paper, somewhere between 24 and 28-pound bond. The ink was a particular shade of dark blue that I associated with government documents. Not black, not navy. The specific blue you see on federal forms and military paperwork. Dr. R. Ellison. I searched the name on my phone. Nothing relevant. No doctor by that name in Kentucky or in any of the surrounding states. At least not one connected to occupational health or psychiatric assessment or any field that would involve cognitive baseline testing. The signature on each form was identical, not stamped, not photocopied. Each one signed individually in the same blue ink as the form text, with the precise, unhurried penmanship of someone who signs hundreds of documents a week. The date fields on the forms corresponded to specific days. I checked them against my personal calendar, an old pocket planner I kept in the glove box of my truck. Every assessment date fell on a day I had been in the building. Every single one. But not just any day. Every assessment date was a Tuesday. Phase 2 maintenance protocol. The November page had used that phrase. Phase 1, I had to assume, was what I had been doing for the past 11 years, maintaining the press in its decommissioned state, collecting the pages, confirming the names, sitting in my folding chair in the basement, and accepting what the machine produced. If Phase 1 was observation and maintenance, what was Phase 2? The first Tuesday in December answered that question. I was in my chair at 3:45, coffee in the thermos, notebook on my lap. The basement was cold, 54 degrees. Below my maintenance threshold. I made a mental note to check the HVAC damper for the basement zone. The press loomed in the half-light, its frame disappearing into shadow above the reach of the gooseneck lamp. I waited. At 4:14, the fluorescence dimmed, longer than usual. 3 full seconds of reduced light, the tubes glowing a dull amber instead of their normal white. Then the folder sound. Thump, hiss, click. 1 sheet, 1 fold. The lights returned. I walked to the tray, 1 page. Warm, I carried it to the bench, unfolded it under the lamp. No obituaries, no names, no masthead, No column layout, just text. A single paragraph, centered on the broadsheet, typeset in the same Cheltenham face the register had used for 40 years. I read it standing up, my hands flat on the workbench on either side of the page. Phase 2 maintenance protocol is now active for Site 4481-M. The pressman designated Gerald R. Merrick has demonstrated sustained fidelity to operational continuity beyond contractual obligation. Cognitive baseline assessments confirm suitability. Emotional profile confirms capacity for sustained asymmetric knowledge without institutional support. The pressman is hereby informed that the printing function of this unit is one component of a regional mortality processing system encompassing 14 active sites within the Eastern Kentucky Coalfield Corridor. The pressman's role in Phase 2 is expanded from passive collection to active verification. Beginning with the next operational cycle, the pressman will receive pre-print proofs requiring manual approval before final publication. No obituary will be printed without the pressman's authorization. The pressman is advised that failure to authorize a proof within the operational window will result in the queued name being held in suspension until the next available cycle. The pressman is further advised that suspension is not a neutral state. Held names experience a progressive degradation of transition integrity that is irreversible beyond 3 cycles. The pressman is responsible for the quality of transitions within his designated coverage area. This responsibility is permanent and non-transferable. I read it 4 times. I sat down on my stool. I read it again. The words did not change. The meaning did not soften. They wanted me to approve the obituaries, not just collect them, approve them. Before the press printed the final page, I would receive a draft, a proof in printing terminology, and I would have to authorize it, sign off on it, give the go-ahead for the machine to print the name that would, within 72 hours, correspond to a body being lowered into the ground. And if I refused, if I withheld approval, the person would not simply live. They would be held, suspended, caught in some intermediate state that the document described as progressive degradation of transition integrity. Not alive, not dead, something worse than either. And that degradation would become permanent after 3 weeks, 3 cycles, 3 Tuesdays of my refusal, turning someone's death into something I could not imagine and did not want to. I was not being offered a choice. I was being given a tool. The difference between a choice and a tool is that a choice allows you to walk away. A tool requires you to pick it up and use it because not using it produces a worse outcome than using it. The following Tuesday, the proof arrived. Not in the delivery tray, on the workbench. I found it at 4:15, already unfolded, already laid flat under the gooseneck lamp, as though someone had placed it there for my review while I sat in my folding chair 12 feet away and noticed nothing. A single sheet, one name. Margaret Ann Whitaker, age 89, of Baxter. Standard obituary, full biographical paragraph, service details, no annotation, no commentary. Just the clean, plain text of a community newspaper obituary with one addition at the bottom of the page. A line reading, authorization. And below that, in smaller type, pressman's signature required for final print release. A pen sat on the workbench beside the proof. A blue ballpoint pen. The same shade of blue as the CB7 forms. I had not put it there. I do not own a blue pen. I use mechanical pencils because ink smears on newsprint, and a pressman who works with ink all day does not add more ink to his hands voluntarily. I picked up the pen. It was warm. Not body temperature warm. Blood warm. Alive warm. The kind of warm that a pen gets when someone has been holding it for a long time, writing steadily, filling out form after form in an office where the work never ends. Margaret Ann Whitaker, 89 years old. I did not know her. I had never heard her name. She was a stranger from a town 8 miles up the road. Her obituary described a full life, teacher at Everett's Elementary for 31 years, member of the Baxter Church of Christ, grandmother of 7, a woman who made quilts for the church auction every fall, and volunteered at the food pantry on Saturdays. She was 89. She had lived long and well, and the obituary read like a celebration. If I signed, she would die within 3 days, peacefully, according to the pattern. Naturally, in the way that 89-year-old women die, a heart that stops, a breath that does not follow the last one, the kind of death that people call a blessing, gone in her sleep, did not suffer. If I did not sign, she would be held, suspended, degrading, for 3 weeks or forever. I signed the proof. My hand did not shake. The pen moved across the authorization line and left my name in that particular blue ink. And the moment I lifted the pen from the paper, the proof disappeared. Not dramatically, not in a flash or a shimmer. It was on the workbench, and then it was not. The way a page disappears into a press. Fed into the mechanism, processed, printed, delivered. The machine had accepted my authorization and moved to final production. The main page appeared in the delivery tray 3 seconds later. Thump, hiss, click. Margaret Ann Whitaker's obituary, now printed in the formal broadsheet format. No authorization line, no signature, just the clean, final version. The version that would match the funeral home website within 72 hours. She died on Thursday, in her sleep. Her granddaughter found her in the morning in bed with the quilt she had been working on for the church auction draped over her lap. Peaceful, natural. A blessing, everyone said. I authorized the next proof the following Tuesday, and the one after that, and every Tuesday since. The proofs arrive on my workbench. The pen appears beside them. I read every obituary. I read the full biographical paragraph. I learn who these people were, what they taught, what they built, what they planted, who they loved. I spend time with each name, not because the process requires it. The process only requires a signature. I spend time because these people deserve a reader before they get a mourner. Someone should know them while they are still alive, even if that someone is a press mechanic in a cold basement at 4 in the morning. Some weeks are easy. The names are old. The lives are complete. The deaths, when they come, are the kind that draw a sad smile and the word peace from people who attend the service. I sign these proofs with something close to tenderness. Some weeks are not easy. In January, the proof listed a name I recognized. Bobby Dale Sizemore, age 44, of Harlan. Bobby worked at the auto parts store on Cumberland Avenue. I bought a serpentine belt from him 3 weeks before his proof arrived. He had 2 daughters in middle school. His obituary said, cardiac arrest, 44 years old, no history of heart disease, survived by his ex-wife and 2 daughters and his mother, who would outlive her son. I held that proof for 20 minutes. The pen sat beside it, warm and patient. I thought about Peggy Cornett. I thought about what Curtis Webb had learned in 1991 with his wife. I thought about the phrase, progressive degradation of transition integrity, and what it meant for a 44-year-old father to be held in suspension because a press mechanic could not bring himself to sign a piece of paper. I signed it. Bobby Dale Sizemore died on a Wednesday. His daughters wore matching black dresses to the funeral. The younger one carried a stuffed animal. I stood in the back of the church, and I did not stay for the reception. The weight of this is not what you think. It is not guilt, exactly. I did not kill Bobby Sizemore. I did not kill Margaret Whitaker. I did not kill any of the names I have authorized. The press printed them because they were going to die. The proof is a formality, a bureaucratic checkpoint in a system that existed long before I sat in that chair. Frank Bates collected pages for 13 years without authorization, and the people died just the same. Curtis Webb collected pages for 12 years, and the people died just the same. The only difference is that now the system asks for signature, and I provide it, because the alternative is not life. The alternative is something worse. But the weight is real. I carry it the way I carry my tools. Belt mounted, always present. distributed across the body so no single point bears too much. The weight shifts when I'm in the grocery store and I see a name I signed 2 weeks ago in the face of a woman buying milk for a family that no longer includes her husband. The weight shifts when I drive past a church on a Saturday and see cars in the lot and know whose service is being held inside because I read the proof before the family wrote the eulogy. The weight shifts when Emma calls me on Sundays and tells me about her classes at the University of Louisville. And I listen to her voice, and I think about the fact that her grandmother's name, Dorothy Ann Merrick, would have appeared on a Tuesday proof in March of 2019, and some version of me, in some timeline I do not fully understand, might have been asked to sign it. I do not know if Dorothy's proof was presented to Curtis Webb or if it was presented to no one. Curtis retired in 2003. I was the active operator by then, but the Phase 2 protocol was not activated until 2025. What happened in the years between? Were the deaths unattended? Were the proofs unsigned? Was there a gap in the system? Or does the system accommodate gaps? I do not know. The press does not explain. The press provides forms and waits for signatures. That is the relationship. I have thought about quitting. I have stood in the basement at 3 in the morning with my truck keys in my hand and thought about walking up those concrete stairs, through the hallway, out the front door, into the parking lot, into my truck, and driving. Not to Lexington, not to Louisville, just driving, away from the building, away from the press, away from the pen and the proofs and the weight of names I did not choose to carry. But the document said permanent and non-transferable. It said I was responsible for the quality of transitions in my designated coverage area. If I leave, the proofs go unsigned. The names accumulate. The people who were supposed to die peacefully in their beds instead hang in some liminal state that degrades their transition until it is unrecognizable. I do not know what that looks like. I do not want to know. But I know what a clean death looks like, because I was there when Dorothy drew her last breath, and it was quiet, and it was terrible, and it was complete. She transitioned. She moved from here to wherever here becomes when you stop breathing, and it was whole, damaged and agonizing, but whole. The thought of that wholeness being degraded, being corrupted, being held in suspension until it rots from the inside. I cannot be the cause of that, not for strangers, not for anyone. So I maintain the press. I keep the temperature between 55 and 65. I oil the bearings. I wipe the frame. I check the blanket tension on cylinders that have not held blankets in over a decade. I sit in my chair on Tuesday mornings at 3:45 with my thermos and my notebook, and I wait for the fluorescence to dim and the folder to speak. Every week I read the proofs. I learn the names. I sign the authorization. I watch the proof disappear and the final page appear in the tray. I take the page to my workbench and I add it to my notebook. I confirm the deaths later in the week. I attend the funerals when I can, standing in the back, knowing what no one else in the room knows. That the person in the casket was printed before they were mourned. That their death passed through a machine before it passed through their body. That a man in a basement signed his name on a line and the signature meant, yes, this person may now die. Last week, the proof had a name that made me set the pen down and press my palms flat against the workbench until the wood grain printed itself into my skin. Emma Grace Merrick, age 17. My granddaughter. Cause of death listed as a motor vehicle accident on Interstate 65 southbound. Mile marker 84. Service at Rest Haven Funeral Home. Harlan, Saturday at 10. Survived by her mother, Karen Merrick Collins, and her grandfather, Gerald R. Merrick. I sat with that proof for 3 hours. The pen waited beside it. The fluorescence hummed. The press sat in its shadows, patient as iron, patient as death, patient as a machine that has been doing its job for 46 years without failure. I thought about what would happen if I did not sign. 3 cycles, 3 Tuesdays. 21 days of my granddaughter suspended between alive and dead, her transition degrading, whatever that means, whatever shape that suffering takes in a state I cannot see or touch or repair. I thought about Peggy Cornett. I thought about Bobby Sizemore's daughters in their matching black dresses. I thought about Curtis Webb, who could not save his wife. I thought about Frank Bates, who never tried. I thought about Dorothy, who died whole, who transitioned clean, who left this world the way a person is supposed to leave it. I did not sign, not yet. For the first time since December, I left the proof on the workbench and went upstairs. I walked out to the parking lot. The sky was the color of ash over a black mountain. The air tasted like October. I called Karen. I told her that I loved her and that I wanted Emma to stay off the interstate this week. Karen laughed and said, "Daddy, she drives the interstate every day to school." I told her to have Emma take the back roads just this week, as a favor to her old grandfather who worries. Karen said she would mention it. She did not promise. Parents do not control 17-year-olds. I know this. I was the parent of a 17-year-old once, and she did what she wanted and married a man I did not approve of and divorced him 3 years later and turned out better for all of it. I went back to the basement. The proof was still on the workbench. The pen was still warm. I sat on my stool and I read Emma's obituary one more time. Motor vehicle accident. Interstate 65. Mile marker 84. A specific location. A specific road. A specific future. Curtis Webb could not save his wife. The deaths are settled. The obituary is not a forecast. The obituary is a receipt. I know this. I have confirmed this 283 times. But Curtis Webb did not have a proof to refuse. Curtis Webb was Phase 1. I am Phase 2. The system gave me a signature line because the signature means something. The authorization is not decorative. If it were, it would not exist. Bureaucracies do not create forms for no reason. Every form serves a function. Every signature authorizes an action. And an authorization, by definition, can be withheld. I have not signed Emma's proof. It is Tuesday morning as I sit here recording this. The proof is in front of me. The pen is beside it. The fluorescents are buzzing. The press is waiting. One cycle has passed. 2 remain before the degradation becomes irreversible. 14 days. I do not know if refusing will save her. I do not know if the accident on Interstate 65 will happen, regardless of my signature, the way Peggy Cornett's heart stopped, regardless of my warning. I do not know if withholding authorization will spare my granddaughter or condemn her to something worse than a car accident on a Tuesday afternoon. I know the machine. I have known it for 22 years. I know every bearing, every cylinder, every gear tooth, every fold. I know the sound it makes when it is functioning within tolerance and the sound it makes when something is wrong. I have never heard it make a sound that I could not diagnose. I have never faced a malfunction I could not repair. This is the first time the machine has asked me to do something I cannot do. And it is the first time I have considered doing something to the machine that I cannot undo. There is a 16-pound sledgehammer in the storage closet. I have owned it for 30 years. I used it once, in 2007, to break up a concrete pad in the parking lot that had heaved over a frozen water line. Dorothy made me promise to wear safety glasses. I can still hear her saying it. "Jerry, you are not 20 anymore. Wear the glasses." The sledgehammer is 12 feet away from the press. The press has been my purpose for 22 years, my companion for 11, my responsibility for the last 11 months. Destroying it would end the proofs. It would end the pages. It would end Phase 2 and Phase 1, and every Tuesday at 4:15 for the rest of whatever time this building stands. It might also end whatever system manages the transitions for every person in the Eastern Kentucky Coalfield Corridor. 14 active sites, the December document said. I am one of 14. If I destroy my unit, what happens to the names in my coverage area? Do they die without authorization? Do they hang in suspension with no one to approve their release? Am I saving Emma or condemning a county? The hammer is in the closet. The proof is on the bench. The pen is warm. The press is waiting. The fluorescents are humming at a frequency that I have come to associate with attention. The building is listening. The iron is dense with focus. And I am a press mechanic who has spent his entire adult life maintaining machines he did not build and does not fully understand, trusting that the engineering was sound, trusting that the design was intentional, trusting that if he did his job, the machine would do its job and the pages would come out clean. I have 2 Tuesdays left, 13 days. The pen is warm. The proof has my granddaughter's name on it. The hammer is in the closet, and I am sitting in a folding chair in a cold basement in Harlan County, Kentucky, trying to decide whether I am a mechanic or a grandfather, because this machine will not let me be both. The fluorescents dim. 4:14. I hear the folder cycle. Thump, hiss, click. A new page. A new set of names that are not Emma's. The weekly business of death continuing on schedule, while I sit here with an unsigned proof and a choice that no maintenance manual has ever covered. I pick up the pen. I put it down. I pick it up. I put it down. The ink is the color of government documents and institutional certainty, and forms signed by doctors I have never met in offices that do not appear on any directory. The ink is warm. Everything in this basement is warm except the iron and me. Dorothy, if you can hear me, if your transition was clean, if you landed wherever landing happens, and you kept the part of you that always knew what to do when I did not, tell me, should I sign the page and let our granddaughter die whole? Or should I break the machine and bet everything on the chance that a mechanic knows something about iron that iron does not know about itself? The press waits. It has been waiting since 1978. It is patient in the way that only machines can be patient, which is to say, without effort, without anxiety, without the need for an answer by any particular deadline. It will wait for my signature the way it waited for Frank Bates and Curtis Webb, and for 11 years of my custodial devotion. It will wait because waiting is what machines do between operations. And an operation, once authorized, is carried out with precision. I cap the pen. I put it in my shirt pocket next to the mechanical pencil I have carried for 15 years. I stand up from the stool. I walk to the storage closet. I open the door. The sledgehammer is leaning against the back wall, right where I left it in 2007. The handle is hickory. The head is 16 pounds of forged steel. I pick it up. The weight settles into my hands the way a tool settles when it knows it is about to be used. I carry it to the press. I stand in front of the first printing unit looking at the frame casting that bears the serial number GC-7802-1147, and I raise the hammer. The fluorescents go out. All of them. The basement is completely dark. Not the dim of a Tuesday morning. Total darkness. The kind of darkness that has weight, that has temperature, that presses against your open eyes and makes them work harder at seeing nothing. In the darkness, the press hums. Not the hum of electricity, not the hum of a motor. The hum of iron remembering what it was before it was a press. The hum of metal that came from somewhere unverified, cast in a foundry that no longer exists, shaped into a machine that prints the dead before they die. The hum fills the basement, and fills my chest, and fills the space behind my eyes where decisions are made. I am holding the hammer. The proof is on the bench. My granddaughter's name is on the proof. 2 Tuesdays remain. The hum stops. The lights return. The press is silent. The basement is exactly as it was. I lower the hammer, not because I have decided, because the decision is not ready. Because a mechanic does not swing a hammer at a machine until he understands what the machine is doing and why, and I do not understand. Not yet. 13 days is not enough time to understand 46 years of purpose. But it is enough time to try. I set the hammer down beside my folding chair. I sit. I open my notebook. I begin to write everything I know, from the first page in June to this moment. Because if I cannot solve this in 13 days, then someone will find this notebook, and maybe they will understand something I missed. Maybe they will be a better mechanic than me, or a braver grandfather, or both. The press is patient. The pen is in my pocket. The proof is unsigned, and every Tuesday at 4:15, in the basement of a building that the county forgot, a dead machine prints the names of the living and waits for a man with a blue pen to decide who is allowed to die. I have not decided yet, but the hammer is close, and the pen is warm, and the next Tuesday is coming.